Hello there, Texas Granny here. Now, I've been hearing some mighty unusual and confusing things out there and thought I should have a sit down with a few folks. You see, yesterday I was discussing the upcoming presidential election with my 13-year-old grandson, and he admitted he is very confused. Now, this is a good kid, a smart kid, a caring kid, but a very anxious child. Now, he has 4 great parents, 2 biological and 2 awesome bonus parents. He is very much loved, safe, and secure, but anxious and confused. He said he'd heard some things that confused and confounded him, and maybe you're confused because you've heard the same things. I know I have. So I'll tell you what I told him. I'll try to explain it like I did to this precious 13-year-old child. Now, he knows quite a few veteran adults from more than one branch of the service. He mentioned that some of them are leaning towards voting for Trump or not voting at all, thinking that they must now have enough information to make an informed decision. I asked him if they had mentioned John Kelly or any of the military leaders who were speaking out about Trump being dangerous and a threat to our democracy. He said they have heard it, but they just don't think it's real. Now, mind you, we can hear several of them, including General John Kelly, saying this in his very own words. And while I know Taylor Swift was a victim of an AI-generated spoof, it was not the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or the Democrats who tried to punk the Swifties. Look it up. This sweet boy is a proud American who, because he personally knows several who have served, would like to join the military himself someday. He said he heard that things were much more peaceful under Trump than Biden. Well, I didn't want to get into years of foreign affairs and foreign relations with him, so I asked him if the people he heard it from were aware that Trump has been talking about America being a garbage can, or that he has plans for the enemies within that he talks about at his rallies. Now, he personally hadn't heard it, so I assumed those adult veterans in his world might not have heard it either. I explained to him that Trump was threatening to send the military to round up his political enemies, and that there was a very strong possibility someone like me could be on that list due to my outspoken activism. His response was that if he was in the military and they sent him out to harm American citizens or migrants, that he just wouldn't do it, that he'd tell them no. Now, I had someone tell me last week that Biden was suppressing freedom of speech on social media and that the Democrats were mean, calling people names and committing crimes. So that's another example of the gaslighting and alternative facts floating around out there confusing people. It's like we're in the upside down because that is the exact opposite of what is going on. Now, you may ask, Granny, how do people believe that nonsense, but not the truth that they can see with their very own eyes? I don't know. It boggles the mind. But there's a reason MAGA Republicans aren't doing as well with college-educated voters. Those of us who understand history can tell you that in Nazi Germany, mental defectives were deemed to be a drag on the state and some of the very first victims of executions. So I'm wondering what makes these folks think they'll be exempt if they're not even smart enough to find the real information. I've had people tell me they like Trump because of his policies. My usual reaction after biting my tongue in two is to ask them to name one, anyone, and not just concepts of policies, but actual plans. That's usually when these folks call me a name and refuse to do any more conversating. As I am sure you have as well, I had a retired professional from my days in corporate America tell me that they were voting Republican because they believe in the sanctity of life. Life? I responded as I reminded them that women are dying. People of color are dying. LGBTQ folks are dying. Migrants are dying. And school children are dying. So again, I think she meant the sanctity of some life. Life the MAGA Christians think they can control. Some of my MAGA friends think Republicans are better for the economy and have good business heads. Well, I like to remind them that Donald Trump has filed bankruptcy multiple times, lost several businesses, and couldn't even make a casino work. And our nation's top economists are saying that his concept of an economic plan would cost middle-class Americans several $1,000s a year. So that confuses me as to why anyone would believe that bunch of cow manure. Well, the MAGA crowd will pick and choose what to believe about him and what to discard, based on their own personal biases. Maybe we all do that, but they have taken it to a whole new level. They chose to believe that Haitians were eating the pets in Springfield. They chose to believe that FEMA agents in hurricane disaster zones were going to take their house and leave them with a paltry $750 cash. They cheer when his supporters say Latinos love making babies or that Puerto Rico is an island of trash. They hoot and holler when he mocks people of color and when he calls the sitting vice president of these United States stupid. Now, these are behaviors that we teach our children to avoid. No wonder my sweet grandson is confused. He watches patriotic grown-ups supporting a vile man who bullies others, trashes our country, and is a convicted felon. Maybe they don't think Trump means the things he says. Believe he won't do the things he threatens. And I'm asking you to ask yourself why. He told us in 2016 he'd replace enough Supreme Court justices with forced birth justices to overturn Roe versus Wade. And he did just that after the Republicans flat out stole a couple of Supreme Court seats. The whole party got behind him and lied as they took those seats from the Democrats. Again, you can look it up. And even if some of them say they don't believe him, we know billionaires do. Because the billionaires who own some of the biggest businesses and media outlets in this country have been cowed into not supporting anyone for president this year, of all years. It's the first time that this has happened in many decades, and it's all because they're afraid of his advertised vengeance and retribution. They're hedging their bets in case America says, we're okay with an authoritarian whose cornbread isn't baked all the way through. Well, I put out signs in the lawn. I put magnets on my car. And I wear a Ask Me About Voting button when I run errands. And you know what? People do. I've helped register voters on the university campuses, been to several women's and LGBTQ protest marches, and block walked many a year for the Democrats. I am not scared to try and save our democracy and country for my precious grandchildren. I guess that makes me braver than those wussy billionaires. Now, these folks know that Donald Trump is a convicted felon. He's a proven sexual assaulter. He's stolen from charities, inflated his wealth when it's benefited him, and deflated it so he wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. He's scammed people out of their money with a fake university and all kinds of ridiculous cheap junk he peddles to those who refuse to face reality. He has an ear that miraculously healed after a so-called assassination attempt by some of his former followers. He's a serial adulterer, a chronic liar, And according to those who worked with him and know him better than anybody else, a man who idolizes Hitler and wants to be a dictator. Personally, I think he's only running for president to stay out of jail, now that his Supreme Court has said presidents have complete immunity for any crimes they commit while in office. He tells us he'll spend his time going after those he thinks have wronged him. He's not going to bother with anything that will help the average American thrive or survive. So the question is, are we going to let people who want to stick it to the libs decide how we live going forward? Are we okay with the government deciding what medical care we receive, who we love, and what kind of God we worship, what books we read, and what opportunities we can have access to? Are we comfortable with the Republican revenge and retribution Project 2025 agenda that goes after anyone who dares try to keep our democracy or sanity? Are we all just confused 13-year-olds, or are we Americans willing to do what it takes to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? If folks tell you they just don't know enough about these two good folks, then you help them figure out that Google machine. Get out there and stir the shit pot if you must. Ask questions when you hear malarkey. Do it for the children, because this election is for all the marbles. Don't let Granny down. Get out there and vote informed. Love you, Texas Granny.